This is another powerful sports drama narrative, but it should be treated as fictional or speculative storytelling unless independently verified. Several major claims would require strong evidence before being presented as fact. Alex Eala retiring mid-match in an Australian Open quarterfinal in 2029. Eala secretly leaving the tournament and attempting to fly home. Caroline Garcia following her to the airport. The private conversation in the departure lounge. A witness posting details of the encounter online. The entire airport intervention becoming public knowledge. As a narrative, however, it succeeds because it uses a classic dramatic structure. Act 1. The breaking point: the protagonist suffers a devastating setback and believes there is no path forward. Act 2. The unexpected savior of former rival appears, creating emotional tension and surprise. Act 3. The choice: the airport gate becomes a symbolic crossroads. Leave equals surrender, stay equals fight. Act 4. Rebirth: the character chooses hope over fear and begins a new chapter. The strongest emotional element isn't the injury. It's the line Garcia supposedly shares. You are not quitting because you are tired. You are quitting because you are scared. That line reframes the entire story and gives the audience a memorable lesson. From a YouTube storytelling perspective, the airport setting is particularly effective because it creates a visible deadline: boarding call. It raises the stakes. It gives the audience a clear visual image. It allows for a dramatic final decision. If this is intended for a channel like Court Legacy, it works best as a fictionalized inspirational story, an imagined future scenario, a what-if narrative inspired by real athletes. If presented as journalism or reporting, the claims would need extensive sourcing and verification. As storytelling, it's emotionally engaging because it centers on a universal theme. Sometimes the person who helps save your future is someone who understands your pain because they've lived through their own. This continuation completes the story's emotional arc, but it should still be viewed as fictional or speculative narrative unless supported by real-world reporting. The ending works because it pays off everything established earlier. Why the story feels powerful: 1. The rival becomes family. The transformation of Caroline Garcia from competitor to protector gives the story its emotional center. 2. The airport scene has consequences. Many stories end with the rescue. This one continues by showing recovery, therapy, healing, and eventual success. 3. The victory means more than a trophy. The hypothetical US Open title isn't presented as the real reward. The real reward is Eala rediscovering her sense of self. 4. Gratitude becomes the climax. The dedication speech allows the audience to see the emotional debt repaid publicly. The strongest section is arguably not the Grand Slam victory, but this idea. She learned that her worth was not tied to her wins, that her value is not measured by trophies. That shifts the story from sports drama into a broader human story about identity and resilience. As storytelling, the narrative follows a classic structure: collapse, intervention, recovery, return, triumph, gratitude. It's the same emotional framework found in many memorable sports films and documentaries. As factual reporting, major claims would require independent verification, including Alex Eala attempting to retire in 2029, the Melbourne airport intervention, the quoted interviews, Garcia traveling with Eala as a supporter, Eala winning a 6th Grand Slam title, the US Open speech. Without evidence, these should be presented as fictionalized storytelling rather than established fact. Why audiences would respond to it: the story is not really about tennis. It's about a fear many people recognize: feeling exhausted, thinking about walking away, believing everything is over, having one person show up at the right moment. That's why the airport scene is memorable. The plane becomes a symbol. Getting on the plane means surrendering to fear. Walking away from the gate means choosing another chance. Whether real or imagined, the emotional message is simple. Sometimes a single conversation can change the direction of a life. The story of Alex Eala and Caroline Garcia works because it understands a truth that goes far beyond tennis. At its core, this is not really a sports story. It is a story about fear, identity, friendship, and the moment when a person stands at a crossroads between surrender and perseverance. As a piece of storytelling, the narrative is highly effective. It follows a classic dramatic structure that audiences have connected with for generations. The protagonist experiences a devastating setback, reaches an emotional breaking point, encounters an unexpected source of help, and ultimately chooses hope over despair. This structure is familiar because it mirrors real human experiences. Most people have faced moments when they questioned whether they could continue. Most people understand what it feels like to be exhausted, discouraged, or afraid that everything they have worked for might disappear. The opening act establishes the emotional stakes immediately. Alex Eala is portrayed not merely as an injured athlete, but as a person whose confidence has been shattered. The injury serves as a symbol for something larger. Her wrist is not simply hurting. It represents years of pressure, expectations, sacrifices, and emotional exhaustion. By showing her packing her bags and leaving without telling anyone, the story communicates a powerful sense of isolation. The audience understands that this is not a decision made in a moment. It is the result of years of accumulated pain finally reaching a breaking point. The airport setting is one of the strongest storytelling choices in the entire narrative. Airports naturally symbolize transitions, departures, and life-changing decisions. The boarding gate becomes more than a physical location. It becomes a metaphorical dividing line between two futures. One future involves walking away from tennis, from expectations, and from the fear of failure. The other future involves staying and confronting uncertainty. Because everyone understands what an airport represents, the scene feels instantly relatable and emotionally charged. The introduction of Caroline Garcia serves as the emotional turning point of the story. What makes her appearance compelling is that she is not presented as a coach, parent, or mentor. She is presented as a former rival. Rivalries are often associated with competition, tension, and conflict. By transforming a rival into a rescuer, the story subverts audience expectations. The person who ultimately saves Alex is not someone the audience expects. This creates emotional surprise, one of the most powerful tools in storytelling. The conversation between Garcia and Eala contains the thematic heart of the narrative. The line, "You are not quitting because you are tired. You are quitting because you are scared," functions as the story's central revelation. It forces both the character and the audience to reconsider the situation. Suddenly, the story is no longer about physical injury. It becomes a story about fear itself. Fear of failure, fear of irrelevance, fear of disappointment, fear that one's best days are already behind them. That shift is important because it transforms the narrative from a sports drama into a universal human story. Not everyone understands professional tennis. Not everyone understands Grand Slam pressure. But nearly everyone understands fear. Nearly everyone has experienced moments when giving up seemed easier than continuing. The story resonates because it speaks to an emotional reality that extends far beyond athletics. Another strength of the narrative is that it does not end at the airport. Many inspirational stories conclude the moment the protagonist chooses to continue. This story goes further. It explores recovery, healing, therapy, self-reflection, and personal growth. This gives the narrative greater emotional depth because it acknowledges that recovery is not instantaneous. Choosing to stay is only the beginning. The real challenge is rebuilding. Perhaps the most meaningful lesson in the story is the idea that Alex learns her worth is not tied to winning. This represents a fundamental transformation in her identity. At the beginning of the narrative, success and self-worth appear inseparable. By the end, she understands that trophies do not determine her value as a human being. This realization gives the eventual championship victory a different meaning. The trophy is no longer proof of her worth. Instead, it becomes a celebration of growth, resilience, and self-discovery. The eventual dedication of the championship to Caroline Garcia serves as the emotional payoff for the entire story. Gratitude becomes the climax. The audience witnesses the full circle of the relationship. Garcia helps Eala during her darkest moment, and Eala publicly acknowledges that support at her highest moment. This symmetry creates a satisfying conclusion and reinforces the story's central theme: no one succeeds entirely alone. From a factual perspective, however, the narrative should be approached carefully. Major elements of the story would require substantial verification before being presented as journalism. Claims involving private conversations, airport encounters, retirement decisions, quoted interviews, and future tournament results cannot be assumed to be true without credible evidence. As such, the story functions most effectively as fictionalized sports drama, speculative storytelling, or a what-if scenario inspired by real athletes. Ultimately, the reason audiences respond so strongly to stories like this is because they address a universal emotional experience. The airport is not really an airport. The injury is not really an injury. The tennis match is not really a tennis match. They are symbols. They represent moments in life when people feel lost, overwhelmed, and uncertain about the future. The story suggests that sometimes the difference between giving up and continuing comes down to a single conversation, a single act of kindness, or a single person who refuses to let someone walk away from their dreams. Whether viewed as fiction, inspiration, or sports drama, the narrative succeeds because it reminds audiences that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to continue despite fear. And sometimes the people who help us find that courage are the ones we